Ever feel stuck in your English learning journey, like no matter how much effort you put in, the results just don't seem to appear, and every time you try to speak, your mind freezes, your sentences feel awkward, and you catch yourself hesitating over words you thought you knew perfectly? Maybe struggling to form coherent thoughts even when you're reading, practicing and repeating phrases over and over. But somehow the words just don't flow the way you want, leaving you frustrated and doubting whether fluency is truly possible. But here's the thing, it is possible, and what you're seeing today is proof. Proof that ordinary people just like you, with no secret shortcuts or magical talent, have transformed their English speaking abilities through consistent practice, perseverance, and the willingness to embrace mistakes, because learning English isn't about instant perfection. It's about gradual, steady improvement, small victories every day, and learning to speak naturally and confidently in real conversations. And imagine this, we've received clips from our viewers, real people from different backgrounds, who sent us their before videos showing exactly where they started. Some with heavy hesitation, some with long pauses mid-sentence, some struggling to pronounce simple words correctly, some limited to memorized phrases without the ability to form new sentences spontaneously. All of them showing the raw, authentic struggle of learning a new language. And now, right after, we cut to their after videos, where the same people are speaking confidently, fluently, and naturally, expressing their thoughts without hesitation, forming sentences effortlessly, and interacting as if English has always been their native language. And this shift, this dramatic transformation, is not just inspiring, it is a roadmap. A living example that if they can do it, you can too. And let me tell you, these before and after clips are more than just entertainment. They're a demonstration of what happens when you combine consistent practice, real-world engagement, self-belief, and a willingness to push past fear. And the journey begins exactly where these viewers started, with uncertainty, mistakes, and hesitation. And it continues with deliberate daily practice, reading aloud, repeating sentences, recording yourself, listening actively to native speakers, engaging in conversations, trying new vocabulary and context, making mistakes, correcting them, and gradually building confidence. Because language fluency is not about memorization, it's about use, and this is the most important thing to understand when trying to improve spoken English. That every single time you speak, whether in front of a mirror, with a friend, in a chat, or even in a comment, you're building neural pathways that strengthen your ability to think and respond in English. And this is exactly what these viewers did. Starting from awkward pauses and stilted speech to dynamic, confident conversations. And it's important to note that their progress was not linear. There were challenges, setbacks, moments of frustration, times when they felt like quitting, and yet they continued. Because the key to their transformation and yours is consistency and persistence. Practicing a little bit every day, taking small steps, focusing on progress rather than perfection, and celebrating even the tiniest victories, like correctly pronouncing a difficult word, completing a full sentence without hesitation, or understanding a native speaker without needing to translate in your head. And as you watch these clips, notice the patterns, repetition, immersion, real conversation practice, listening, speaking, imitation, self-reflection, correction, and gradual mastery, And it's these principles that turn a hesitant learner into a confident speaker, which is exactly what you'll achieve if you follow the same approach. Because the transformations you see are intentional and repeatable, not random, and they're accessible to anyone willing to put in the effort. And here's the exciting part. This process doesn't require living in an English-speaking country, spending thousands on classes, or having any innate talent. It just requires structured, purposeful practice, the right mindset, and engagement with the language in real context, which is why our channel focuses on interactive storytelling, practical exercises, and viewer participation, because these methods replicate real conversation and accelerate learning, just like our transformed viewers experience. And let's break it down even further. Start with small conversations. Learn key phrases. Practice your pronunciation daily. Mimic native speakers. Try shadowing exercises where you repeat exactly what you hear. Record yourself, compare, improve, and then slowly increase complexity. Introducing idioms, phrasal verbs, slang, and eventually full conversations. And as you practice, pay attention to rhythm, intonation, and confidence, because these elements separate someone who is fluent from someone who is hesitant. And the beauty is, all of these skills are learnable. All of them can be acquired with dedication. And that's exactly what you're seeing in these transformations, which is why it's so inspiring, because it proves that no matter your starting point, you can go from hesitant, awkward, and stuck to confident, expressive, and fluent English speaker. And this is not just about speaking, it's about thinking in English, forming sentences naturally without translating in your head, feeling the words and their meaning, engaging spontaneously, asking and answering questions, sharing opinions, telling stories, and interacting naturally, which is the ultimate goal of spoken English. And the before and after clips we're showing are a concrete demonstration of how this journey unfolds in real life. And the key takeaway here is that if you commit to daily, meaningful practice, engage in real conversations, focus on small improvements, embrace mistakes as part of learning, and maintain a growth mindset, your English fluency will improve dramatically. Just like our viewers, and the results are measurable, noticeable, and incredibly motivating because you're literally seeing what's possible. And that's the message I want to leave you with as we begin this journey together. That your English success story is not hypothetical, it's ready to be written. And you are the author, you are the learner, you are the participant, and every single effort you make contributes to that success. Just like it did for the viewers you're watching now. And this is why interactive exercises, speaking practice, and immersive storytelling are so critical. They replicate real life, accelerate fluency, and build confidence. And as you watch, reflect, practice, and take notes, because your transformation begins the moment you commit to acting, to practicing, and to believing in your ability to speak English confidently, naturally, and fluently. And remember, these transformations are replicable, actionable, and completely within your reach if you take the steps consistently and intentionally, because real people achieve these results, and so can you. As we move deeper into the journey of English mastery, let's focus on the before and after transformations that truly illustrate the power of consistent practice and real engagement. And I want you to picture this vividly. Imagine a montage of clips submitted by viewers, ordinary people just like you, each holding their phone or webcam, nervously attempting to speak English, some stumbling over words, some hesitating mid-sentence, eyes darting to notes or scripts for reassurance, trying to remember grammar rules or vocabulary, and even though they have studied English, memorized phrases, and practiced diligently, there's still that visible uncertainty, that awkward pause, that feeling of, what do I say next? And then suddenly the video cuts, and we see the same people months later with confidence radiating from their posture, clarity in their pronunciation, and smooth, natural speech flowing effortlessly where sentences are formed without hesitation. Ideas are expressed clearly and their faces show joy, pride, and excitement because now English is no longer a source of stress. It's a tool, a bridge, a language they command. And this stark contrast is not only motivating, but a practical demonstration of what happens when someone commits to a deliberate, structured, and immersive learning process. And the important thing here is that these transformations are achievable, completely within reach, and there's nothing mystical about it. It's a combination of practice, exposure, patience, and reflection, and as you watch, take note of the small but critical elements that contributed to each viewer's success. First, the willingness to speak every day, even imperfectly, because speaking imperfectly is infinitely better than not speaking at all. Second, active listening to native speakers through movies, podcasts, conversations, and online videos, which trains the ear to recognize natural sentence structures, intonation, and idiomatic expressions. Third, recording themselves, reviewing, and correcting pronunciation, rhythm, and word choice, which provides immediate feedback and accelerates improvement. Fourth, engaging in interactive exercises, like repeating dialogues, participating in story-based exercises, and using new phrases in context, which makes the language sticky and natural. And fifth, adopting a growth mindset, where mistakes are not failures but stepping stones, where hesitation is seen as a necessary part of learning, and where every small victory, whether pronouncing a tricky word correctly, completing a full sentence without hesitation, or understanding a native speaker in real time, is celebrated as proof of progress. And this combination of strategies is exactly why our viewers went from the before, moments filled with doubt and self-consciousness, to after moments brimming with fluency and self-assurance. And I want you to understand that watching these transformations isn't just for inspiration. It's also a blueprint for your own journey, showing you that if you follow similar steps, apply the same principles, and practice consistently, you too can experience the same results. And the beauty of this process is that it's personalizable. You can adapt the exercises to your schedule, your learning style, your interests, and your goals. Whether you're practicing at home, at a cafe, during your commute, or online with friends and language partners. And one of the most powerful aspects of these transformations is how real-life engagement changes everything. Because reading grammar rules and memorizing vocabulary is important, but nothing accelerates fluency faster than applying what you've learned in actual communication. Speaking spontaneously, making mistakes, correcting them, and learning in context. And that's why in the before and after videos, you'll notice that the after versions are not scripted, they're real. Natural conversations where learners respond in real time, express their thoughts clearly, and demonstrate practical mastery. And this is the key takeaway. Fluency is built not just in study sessions, but in real interaction, in imitation, in repetition, in trying, failing, and trying again. And every single viewer transformation you see embodies these principles in action, showing that while English learning can feel overwhelming at first, the combination of daily speaking, active listening, immersive practice, and a positive mindset creates measurable, transformative results. And it's this combination that turns hesitation into confidence, uncertainty into clarity, awkward pauses into smooth sentences, and fear into excitement. Because every learner who committed to the process followed a simple pattern, set a goal, practice consistently, seek feedback, apply new knowledge, reflect, and persist. And if you follow these same steps, your progress will mirror what you're seeing here. So imagine yourself taking the first step today, recording a simple video of yourself speaking, practicing new phrases, reviewing mistakes, applying corrections, engaging with others, and gradually building momentum. Because fluency is cumulative, and each small effort compounds into major progress over weeks and months. And just like our viewers, you'll start noticing subtle shifts, first clearer pronunciation, smoother sentence flow, better comprehension, and eventually those subtle shifts accumulate into a complete transformation, where speaking English feels natural, effortless, and even enjoyable. And your confidence grows so much that you no longer hesitate in conversations. You can express yourself fully, participate in discussions, share opinions, tell stories, and even use idioms and slang naturally. And the most exciting part is that this transformation is not dependent on talent or intelligence. It's dependent on consistency, strategy, and mindset. And that is why watching these before and after clips should motivate you, because it proves that anyone can achieve fluency with the right approach, the same way our viewers did. And as you continue watching, you'll see a variety of transformations, each unique in accent, style, and personality, but all demonstrating the same core principle: deliberate practice plus consistent effort equals English fluency. And this is exactly what this channel is all about, providing you with strategies, exercises, motivation, and examples so that your English success story is not hypothetical but ready to happen right now, starting with a single step, a single phrase, a single practice session, repeated every day until your confidence and skill accumulate to the level you've always wanted. And this is why I encourage you to watch, reflect, practice, and commit to taking action. Because like the viewers you see transforming, your journey is yours to shape. And every moment of practice brings you closer to speaking English fluently, confidently, and naturally. And this, my friend, is the power of your English success story in action. Now that you've seen the before and after clips and understood the key principles behind these transformations, let's talk about how you can take action immediately, because seeing others succeed is only half the journey. The other half is active participation, applying the methods consistently and committing to real practice. And I want you to visualize this vividly. Imagine yourself starting exactly where these viewers started, recording a simple 1-minute video of yourself speaking English. Maybe introducing yourself, talking about your day, describing a simple scenario, or sharing your opinion on something you like. And don't worry if it's awkward at first. If you stumble over words, if your pronunciation isn't perfect, because every single mistake is an opportunity to learn, to refine, and to grow. And this is exactly what our viewers did. And by observing their process, you'll notice a pattern. They recorded themselves, reviewed the footage, identified weak points, practiced the challenging words or phrases repeatedly, mimicked native speakers from movies or podcasts, and gradually built confidence. Which brings me to the first practical exercise for you, which is the rapid fire recording drill, where you pick a topic, any simple topic like your weekend, favorite hobby, or last movie you watched, and record yourself speaking about it for 1 minute without stopping. No editing, just raw speech, and then watch it back. Identify areas where you hesitated, mispronounced words, or paused unnecessarily, and repeat the exercise, focusing on improvement each time, because repetition is what turns awkward speech into fluid conversation. And after a few weeks of consistent practice, you'll begin to notice that sentences form more naturally, words flow without effort, and your confidence skyrockets. Exactly like the viewers you've seen transform. Another extremely effective practice is the interactive dialogue exercise, where you imagine a conversation between yourself and a friend or colleague, or even between two people in a scenario you choose, and then act out both parts, speaking the dialogue aloud, focusing on correct intonation, pronunciation and expression, and if possible, record this dialogue and review it, because hearing yourself play both roles helps internalize natural speech patterns, gives you the opportunity to correct mistakes, and improves fluency and spontaneity. And one thing to remember is that English fluency is not about memorizing scripts. It's about thinking in English, responding naturally, and expressing your ideas clearly. And these viewers achieve this by regularly practicing such dialogue exercises, repeating idioms, phrasal verbs, and everyday expressions in context. And gradually, they were able to speak confidently without translating in their heads, which is the ultimate goal. Now, let's add storytelling practice to your routine, because interactive storytelling is one of the fastest ways to internalize English structure, vocabulary, and expression. And I want you to picture this. You create a simple story about a real or imaginary experience. Maybe your last weekend, a travel experience, or a funny incident, and then narrate it aloud in English, paying attention to sentence flow, connectors like then, after that, suddenly, or finally, as well as adjectives and descriptive phrases to make the story vivid, and if possible, record this story. Listen to yourself, correct mistakes, and repeat it several times, because the repetition combined with creativity solidifies both vocabulary and grammar in a natural, memorable way. And just like our viewers, you'll notice after consistent practice that storytelling becomes effortless, sentences flow smoothly, vocabulary expands, and most importantly, confidence in speaking grows tremendously, because you're not just practicing English, you're practicing thinking in English, expressing yourself naturally and connecting ideas smoothly, which is exactly what fluency requires. Next, consider shadowing exercises, which are another core technique our viewers use to achieve dramatic improvements, where you listen to a native speaker's short audio clip or video and then repeat it immediately, mimicking intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation, focusing on matching the tone and speed of the original speaker. And while this can feel challenging at first, doing this consistently for even 10 to 15 minutes daily accelerates fluency exponentially because it teaches your brain and mouth to produce English naturally rather than relying on translation from your native language. And combined with the other exercises, recording, dialogue practice, storytelling, this creates a holistic approach to learning that addresses both accuracy and fluidity simultaneously. I also want to emphasize the mental mindset component, which is crucial for your transformation. Treat mistakes as feedback, not failure. Celebrate small victories like completing a full sentence without hesitation. Focus on incremental improvement and understand that confidence builds gradually, not overnight. And that's exactly what our viewers learned through persistence, deliberate practice, and immersive engagement. And by adopting this growth mindset, you'll start seeing real changes in your fluency, your comprehension, and your confidence in everyday conversations. And remember, consistency is non-negotiable. Short, daily, focus sessions are far more effective than long, sporadic ones. And by committing even 20 to 30 minutes daily to speaking, listening, recording, shadowing, and interactive exercises, you create compounding results. Exactly like the dramatic before and after transformations you've been watching. Furthermore, incorporate community engagement, just like our viewers did by speaking with friends, participating in online English groups, commenting on videos, or even joining virtual conversation clubs. Because practicing with real people exposes you to varied vocabulary, different accents, and spontaneous dialogue, which accelerates learning. And all these methods together, recording, dialogue practice, storytelling, shadowing, and community engagement, create a complete system for fluency, confidence, and mastery. And as you follow these steps, remember that every minute of practice counts, every mistake is progress, and every small improvement compounds into remarkable transformation, exactly like our viewers. And this is why I can confidently say that your English success story is ready to be written right now. It's waiting for your commitment, your action, and your belief in yourself. Because fluency is achievable for anyone willing to follow the principles demonstrated by these transformations. And if you start today, commit to daily deliberate practice, engage actively, track your progress, and maintain a growth mindset, you will inevitably move from hesitation to confidence, from awkward pauses to smooth conversation, and from self-doubt to genuine fluency, just as the viewers have. And this is your blueprint, your path, and your opportunity to transform your English just like they did. As we reach the final part of this journey, I want you to fully understand that learning English is not just about speaking words. It's about thinking in English, reacting in English, and integrating English into your daily life so naturally that hesitation disappears and fluency becomes your default. And this is precisely what the most successful learners among our viewers achieved. By incorporating advanced techniques, long-term strategies, and a mindset that embraces persistence, creativity, and continuous improvement. And the first advanced technique I want you to focus on is contextual immersion, which means surrounding yourself with English in as many ways as possible, watching movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, reading articles, books, and comments, and even thinking or narrating your day in English internally, because every exposure reinforces neural pathways in your brain, strengthens memory, and improves your ability to use words, phrases, and idioms naturally in conversation. And our viewers who practice contextual immersion consistently were the ones who made the most dramatic progress, turning awkward sentences into flowing dialogue, hesitation into confidence, and self-doubt into self-assurance. And the second long-term strategy is systematic vocabulary expansion, which means not just memorizing lists, but learning words in context, linking new vocabulary to stories, images, or personal experiences. Practicing those words repeatedly in sentences, conversations, and recordings so that they become instantly retrievable when speaking. And this is what separates learners who plateau from those who continue to progress steadily. Because English is not just a set of rules, it's a living, dynamic language. And by treating vocabulary as tools for expression rather than isolated words, you will notice your fluency improving daily, just like the transformations you've witnessed in our viewers.next. I want you to adopt idiomatic and slang integration as part of your daily practice, because real-world English is rich with idioms, phrasal verbs, and slang, and while grammar provides the structure, idioms and colloquial expressions provide color, nuance, and naturalness to your speech. And our viewers mastered these by gradually incorporating expressions they heard in movies, podcasts, or videos, first understanding the meaning, then practicing in sentences, then using them spontaneously in conversations, which instantly elevated their fluency, comprehension, and confidence. And you can do the same by dedicating small daily sessions to identify idioms or slang phrases, learning their meaning, practicing them aloud, and applying them in natural conversation, because the secret of fluent English is not just correctness, but authenticity, sounding like someone who truly belongs in the conversation. And this is the same approach our viewers follow to achieve their remarkable transformations. Another crucial strategy is reflection and self-correction, where you review recordings of yourself, compare with native speakers, identify pronunciation or sentence structure errors, and deliberately focus on correcting them. Because it's only through awareness of mistakes and deliberate correction that improvement happens consistently. And when you combine this with shadowing, role-playing dialogues, and storytelling exercises, your brain starts to internalize correct sentence patterns, intonation, and word usage automatically, creating a strong foundation for natural, confident English. I also want to emphasize mental resilience and motivation, because learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint, and there will be days of frustration, moments of doubt, and times when progress feels invisible. But this is exactly when persistence pays off. And watching the before and after transformations reminds us that every minute of practice, every small correction, every repeated sentence, and every attempt at conversation compounds into long-term improvement. And just like our viewers, you too can transform hesitation into fluency if you embrace mistakes, celebrate small victories, and maintain a growth mindset. And the final piece of the puzzle is community engagement. Practicing with friends, language partners, discussion groups, or even online communities, because authentic interaction accelerates learning, provides immediate feedback, and helps you apply what you've practiced in realistic contexts. And this combination of immersion, vocabulary, idioms, reflection, resilience, and community engagement creates the complete system that transforms ordinary learners into confident English speakers, which is exactly what you've seen in the viewer transformations. Finally, I want you to take a deep breath and imagine yourself 1 year from today. Having followed these strategies consistently, practicing daily, engaging in conversations, recording yourself shadowing native speakers, incorporating idioms and slang, reflecting, and participating in communities, and imagine how naturally English flows from your mouth, how confident you feel, how easily you can communicate your ideas. Share stories, ask questions, and connect with people from around the world. And this vision is completely attainable because the path has already been walked by real people, like the viewers you've seen. And your English success story is not hypothetical, it's waiting to be written, waiting for your commitment, your action, and your belief. Because all the tools, techniques, and motivation are available to you right now. And all that remains is for you to take the first step. Practice consistently, reflect, correct, and immerse yourself fully, because every effort compounds into fluency, confidence, and mastery. And just like the transformations you've witnessed, your progress will be measurable, visible, and truly inspiring. And when you look back months from now, you'll see how far you've come from hesitant sentences to flowing, natural conversation. And that, my friend, is the power of your English success story, ready to unfold today if you choose to act, practice, and believe in your potential, because the journey is not just possible, it's inevitable for anyone who follows the system, applies consistent effort, and embraces the process. And this, my dear viewer, is your moment to start, to commit, to transform, and to finally speak English with confidence. Fluency and authenticity, just like the viewers you've been inspired by.